Ohio, and dropped this video on yesterday.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Legend, and I was born as John R. Stevens from a place called Springfield, Ohio. Oh, Springfield, Ohio. You may have heard of Springfield, Ohio this week. In fact, if you watched the debate, we were discussed by our presidential candidates, including a very special, interesting man named Donald J. Trump. Now, Springfield has had a large influx of Haitian immigrants who have come to our city. Now, our city had been shrinking for decades. We didn't have enough jobs. We didn't have enough opportunity. So people left and went somewhere else. So when I was there, we had upwards of 75,000 people. And in the last 5 years, we were down to like 60,000 people. But of late, during the Biden administration, there have been more jobs that opened up, more manufacturing jobs, more plants, factories that needed employees and were ready to hire people. So we had a lot of job opportunities, and we didn't have enough people in our town of 60,000 people to fill those jobs. And during the same time, there had been upheaval and turmoil in Haiti, and the federal government granted visas and immigration status to a certain number of Haitian immigrants so they could come to our country legally. And our demand in Springfield for additional labor met up with the supply of additional Haitian immigrants. And here we are. We had about 15,000 or so immigrants move to my town of 60,000. Now, you might say, wow, that's a lot of people for a town that only had 60,000 before. That's a 25% increase. That is correct. So you might imagine there are some challenges with, integrating a new population, new language, new culture, new dietary preferences, all kinds of reasons why there might be growing pains, making sure there are enough services to accommodate the new larger population that might need bilingual service providers, et cetera, et cetera. So there are plenty of reasons why this might be a challenge for my hometown. But the bottom line is these people came to Springfield because there were jobs for them and they were willing to work. And they wanted to live the American dream, just like your German ancestors, your Irish ancestors, your Italian ancestors, your Jewish ancestors, your Jamaican ancestors, your Polish ancestors, all these ancestors who have moved to this country, maybe not speaking the language that everyone else spoke, maybe not eating the same foods, maybe having to adjust, maybe having to integrate, but all coming because they saw opportunity for themselves and their families in the American dream, and they came here to do that. Some facts about immigrants. They usually do very well here. They are hardworking, they're ambitious, they commit less crime than native-born Americans, and they will assimilate and integrate in time, but it takes time. So I think all of us need to have the same kind of grace that we would want our ancestors to have when they moved here with our Haitian brothers and sisters who move here too. And nobody's eating cats. Nobody's eating dogs. We all just want to live and flourish and raise our families in a healthy and safe environment. How about we love one another? I grew up in the Christian tradition. We said to love our neighbor as we love ourselves and treat strangers as though they might be Christ. So, how about we adopt that ethos when we talk about immigrants moving to our communities and don't spread hateful, xenophobic, racist lies about them. John R. Stevens from Springfield, signing off.
All right, folks, my panel.
Do you remember the video that I did on the Mayflower? Friday, August the 30th, 2024. And today I want to deal with loyalist defensive fighting and the difference between that and conflict resolution or mediation. And I think that in order to begin this discussion intelligently, that we need to do a history lesson on the Mayflower Compact and how that time in the 1600s changed everything for the natives of North America who live in the central eastern United States. And when I say central eastern, I mean on the coast, not central in terms of the central United States in that time zone. My question, John, is why did you leave Springfield? How old were you when you left? Why don't you live there now? Why didn't you ever go back? Where's your family? I want to share with you a clip from a forum that was held with author Nancy Isenberg to help you to understand the history of the ancestors that John is speaking about. But I want to do it more because the problem is it's not just that this is a place where runaways come to, but if you think about that context and the character of people who come here, who want to immigrate here, then it fits. It's not those. Those are the ones that do well here because we love here. Intermingled with them are people who are sent here to cause problems for the people who have already made a home here, including people who were previously runaways. You cannot leave a place that has been destroyed to go to a place where that destruction does not exist and not also destroy that place. And that applies for the runaways too, not necessarily because they have a desire to destroy what they themselves have built, but because they don't understand why they had to leave their home in the first place. And because they don't understand why they had to leave their home in the first place, they don't understand that there were people who came with them with the expressed intent to destroy anything that they built in the same way they did from the place that they left. That is why the earth is dying. That is exactly how a cancer functions. That is what a malignancy looks like. And I hope that you really understand that. But I want to allow Nancy an opportunity to speak on behalf of those who understand the other side of immigration and what happened to those people of Irish descent and Scottish descent, the other ish, who were running from something devastating and traumatic. But there were people there who were causing the devastation and the trauma, who were with them, some of which helped them to get here because they were resilient and they knew that they would build. They would work hard. They would be hard workers. You need to understand the difference. What you are pouring into, what you are contributing to, and the level of influence you have over people who are listening to you. And to get your facts straight. But it's harder to get your facts straight when you don't know what team you're playing for. You're on the wrong team. And that is why the earth is dying. You have children too, don't you, John? You have a family too. A wife who you seem to care about very much. What kind of life are you perpetuating for your kids? For my kids? For all children?
One of the things I wanted to do with this book is show that our notions of class have a much longer and older history. And I take it all the way back to the British colonial period, in part because even though we tell ourselves that the American Revolution, we left Great Britain, we got rid of the aristocracy, in fact, none of that is true. We borrowed a great deal from British and English culture. And two of the concepts that are sort of central to where white trash comes from is, first of all, since we have been an agrarian nation for over half our history, it's important to pay attention to rural ways of thinking about class. And the idea of white trash actually was first used by Richard Hakluyt, who was an Elizabethan adventurer who made a pitch to Queen Elizabeth about why we needed the New World. And the real reason that he felt the New World was important is that it was going to be the trash bin for the poor and the idle and the worthless people in England. Now this, of course, upsets the apple cart on the idea that somehow everyone who came to the New World were seeking religious liberty. It's not true. Most people were coming for economic reasons, and the word that was used by Richard Hakluyt to describe these people was waste people. So therefore, the idea of trash, Thomas Jefferson, Abigail Adams referred to the rural white population as rubbish. Now we still hear that. British people still use that term today. But part of what I was trying to uncover is that two big concepts that we need to think about still shape our class system today. One is the idea of land and the importance of the civic value and the economic value and the class value of being a landowner. And this is important because one of the things that we have to realize is that even in the early founding period, you couldn't vote unless you owned land, and land in a sense was seen as the real source of liberty. You had to be a landowner. So land, and if we think about why land continued to be associated with the poor were very much fashioned as either being seen as people who lived on land that was considered wasteland, because that's where waste people came from. Wasteland is land that's left untilled and fallow and is unproductive. So therefore, the waste people throughout American history end up being associated with unproductive land. For example, the term redneck is identified as being associated with people who live in swamps. At the same time, hillbillies are associated with people who live in the hills and are seen as poor. So land that's unproductive is the source of one important definition for understanding class identity. The other important theme that I highlight, which we also inherited from the British, is the idea of breeding. And this is really important because this is the idea that one's class identity is passed from one generation to the next. This connects to pedigree, lineage, and the fact that for the British and for early Americans and Americans in general, one of the things that we don't pay attention to is that class is not just only about property ownership or the labor value of the job you have. It's also very much linked to breeding and even your children. Children were a measure of the class identity and class status of individuals, because the poor children were always seen as unhealthy, poorly clothed, poorly fed. And by the time the term white trash appears, which is in the 1820s, at that moment, poor whites and white trash are now being associated with two other rather disturbing terms for the poor, which were clay eaters and sandhillers. Sandhillers, again, they lived on worthless sand. Clay eaters is where they were seen as not even being white. They were seen as having the skin color, a yellowish tint to their skin color that was compared to parchment. And part of the reason they had this disease is it's pellagra, but in the 1820s, 1840s, no one identified this. This doesn't get identified until the early 20th century. So when we think about class, we have to return to the importance of breeding, inheritance, and this is also why, as I trace my history, the other important thing to think about, and this unfortunately is still part of our history today, the other group that the English despised were vagrants. So the poor, in a sense, are always associated with people who don't put down roots, who aren't property owners, who are seen as people who are always on the move, people who, and this is actually even used today as a rationale for dealing with the poor. You might all be familiar with Kevin Williamson. He wrote for the National Review. When he wrote a very hostile essay attacking Trump supporters, he not only attacked them for living in dying cities and towns, and also used another favorite trope, referred to their critique as a yelping dog. But then he went on to say that, well, if you're poor, all you have to do is pack your bags and move. And this is, this idea of mobility continues to be a part of white trash identity, because in the late 19th century, there were cracker carts, because cracker is another important term for poor whites. And if we think about trailer trash, that's a house on wheels. That's a home, that's a place you live that never gets the same, it's never really seen as a home, because it's seen as again, people who are on the move, people who are not real property owners. So if you can go away from tonight thinking about several things that continue to be a part of our class identity, one is the way it's passed from parent to child, and that's even true for sociologists. They have found in 2015 the most important predictor of being successful in this country is linked to the wealth and privilege that you get from not only your parents, but your ancestors. So lineage and this idea of inheritance is still very much a part of our class definition. The other is this idea of breeding. Breeding is not only the way we might think of it in a positive term as acquiring taste or skills. It also, for white trash, it was seen as an imposed identity, something you literally inherited, and that's why I have a great deal to say about the eugenics movement and how incredibly popular that was. Everyone subscribed to this ideology. Professors at Harvard, leading politicians like Teddy Roosevelt. As you know, the major institute for studying eugenics was in New York, was in Long Island. Charles Davenport was the head of that. So these three concepts, mobility, vagrancy, breeding, pedigree, land and property, I think still continue to be extremely important ways for how we sort and divide people, because class isn't just about the money you earn, it isn't just about your job and the status, it's also bodily. It's also seen as the way you appear, and that's why white trash were always seen as, children who are barefoot, diseased, and that this is sort of the dark side of class that really did define this cultural pattern that gets reinvented as the terms get reinvented across history and time.
Well, so